Good evening, everyone. My name is Julie Naylor, and I'm here to talk to you tonight about my passion for wildlife photography. I have lived in and around Auchterarder my whole life. I attended Auchterarder High School as it was then and left at 16. I went on to Perth College to learn the hairdressing trade. I now have a small business on the high street which I have managed for 10 years this month. I live with my boyfriend Mark, who is from Angus, and we have many shared interests, one of which is our mutual admiration for all things wild. I was fortunate enough to grow up in a small cottage near my family's farm 2 miles outside of Auchterarder. Fields, woods and farm animals surrounded us, and as a child I was mostly to be found outside exploring, probably up to my dirty knees in frog spawn, collected and left at the back door in an old ice cream tub. I have always had an intense curiosity for the natural world, and because of this curiosity as a youngster, I learned to identify certain birds and animals I saw by looking through the well-stocked bookshelf my parents owned. I emotionally embraced every wild sighting as a child, and I still get that same feeling now when I experience a true wild moment in nature. And still, like a child, I am always learning new things about our natural world. My interest in wildlife photography evolved from the misery that was the pandemic. After being out of work for nearly 3 months, I purchased my first camera in June 2020. The camera came with 2 lenses, an 18 to 55 and a 35 to 300mm. I had absolutely no idea what that meant, but I excitedly charged up the camera ready for action. During lockdown, Mark and I found ourselves rambling all over local spots. One place in particular became a regular walk, a small patch of Scots pine trees next to my parents. We saw lots of tracks and signs, including animal scat in the fallen trees. We spotted discarded feathers, chewed pine cones, owl pellets and fur. We gathered our finds in a wee bag for closer inspection at home. Now, these nibbled pine cones are a good sign to look out for on your walks. They're a surefire sign that squirrels are around. Have a wee look at these. Pass them along. Now. Most days I would see a red squirrel high up in the canopy and began to bring some nuts on our walks to see if I could tempt it down. This is when and where my red squirrel obsession began. Mark had returned to work before I did, so I spent many a summer's day wandering to the woods with my camera to see if I could get better photographs of the red squirrel. I was determined to get my Canon off of auto mode and start to produce something worth saving. I had bought a couple of books to help me find my way around the camera, and I also used YouTube, which helped me to comprehend the potential my camera had. I struggled with enough light in the beginning, and my shots were on the dark side, as you can see. Over the next few months, I began to attract a number of different red squirrels to my piles of hazelnuts, which I had placed on nearby fallen trees and stumps. Their speed and agility make them difficult subjects, but as their visits increased, my images of them began to slowly improve. I decided to invest in a larger lens so I could get more intimate shots of them without getting too close. I purchased a Sigma 150 to 600mm, the ultimate affordable beginner's wildlife telescopic lens, heavy but old reliable. I spent a lot of time in the woods over the pandemic observing and learning the squirrels' behaviour. I watched and listened to how they interacted with each other, and I witnessed one individual gathering dry moss for its drain. I was beginning to recognise individuals by their tail colour, ear tufts, or by their general behaviour. They were getting used to my presence also. As long as I stayed quiet and made my movements slowly, the squirrels carried on munching and caching my hazelnuts. As the seasons drifted on, I sat in all weathers and captured the squirrels in the snow. Our native red squirrels are in trouble in the UK as competition from the larger non-native greys, road casualties and habitat loss all contribute to their decline. It is estimated that in the UK, grey squirrels outnumber the reds 100 to 1. We must protect and conserve our native reds. In certain parts of Scotland, pine marten have been released to help drive the grey numbers down. As the reds have evolved since the Ice Age alongside the pine marten, the red squirrels have a primeval response in recognising pine marten scent, unlike the non-native greys. who by comparison have only been here a short time and do not have that superpower. If any of you are lucky enough to have red squirrels coming into your garden, then that is wonderful. But if you have grey squirrels attending your garden as well, please stop feeding all wildlife and report your grey sightings to Scottish Squirrels. Curiosity to determine the owners of the various animal tracks and scat had compelled me to install a trail camera. Trail cams are a fantastic way of ascertaining what wildlife is around when you are not there. They are weatherproof and motion activated and can record images, videos and sound day or night. When looking for the best placement for the camera, look for tracks and signs and try to avoid direct sunlight. I placed my camera on a fallen tree on which I placed hazelnuts to tempt in any locals. I got some fantastic footage, as you can see, of red squirrels chasing, caching and munching. There were also some wonderful nighttime visitors too. Roe deer, fox, hare, and most surprisingly, pine marten. I was elated by these sightings, so I decided to buy trail camera number 2. One camera has been in the same location, strapped to the same tree since 2020. This camera has given me loads of interesting footage. I was elated, beg your pardon. This is a perfect example of what I said earlier about the red squirrel's primeval responses. Look at how the red squirrel rubs itself where the pine marten had just sprayed. The red squirrel appears to be masking the scent of the pine marten with his own scent. I was amazed to get this rarely seen footage. The other camera, I have moved around the woodland a few times, striving for the best angle or view. Desperate not to have 286 videos of a piece of bracken blowing in the wind. It happens, folks. Trail camera operations take much patience and can be trial and error. A few months later, I had my first glimpse of a badger on the cam. Heavy and low to the ground, its shape unmistakable. Going forward, I was having frequent sightings of this badger. I knew it was the same badger as it has a very distinct curve or bend in its tail. As the months went on, I noticed this individual had begun to dig out latrines and bolt holes throughout the woodland, eventually excavating a new home for itself in the squirrel wood. I sat out a few evenings in early autumn last year, setting up in a field near to the woods in hope of a real-life sighting, and maybe some images, as I had only been seeing the one badger on the trail camera, emerging at different times after dusk. I did not hold up much hope, and I was right. I still have no pictures on my DSLR. Winter and into 22, I was beginning to wonder how long one individual could survive on its own. It had certainly created a great home for itself. In February this year, I collected footage of 2 badgers. I was happy, finally a pair. She's okay. I have continued to monitor this badger and her set, but it would appear that their perfectly normal, rough-looking mating was unsuccessful. The male badger, or Brock, was only passing through for mating and probably belongs to another set in the locality. The female is alone again and has been all year. Beautiful. Must be itchy living in this setting. As the second lockdown eased, my photography slowly improved. I was enjoying spending time capturing my garden birds, and even attempting larger birds in flight. There is a great variety of birds to capture locally. Raptures can be seen scouring the fields for unsuspecting prey, or hovering by our roadside verges. Buzzards are our most common bird of prey here. They are not known as the Scottish tourist eagle for nothing. As the seasons change, the variation of birds change with it. In the autumn and winter months, a huge number of migrant birds stop to refuel on their long journeys, stripping our bushes of berries. These thrush species migrate from Scandinavia and some from even as far as Russia. In the spring months, I anticipate the return of migrant warblers like the chiffchaff. After spending the winter in the Med or as far south as sub-Saharan Africa, maestros like the willow warbler and sedge warbler return with the much-needed uplifting dawn chorus. Sometimes you can learn of a rare bird sighting and travel to it. Tick it off, a lifer. This is the real definition of twitching. I have done this once so far in my 2 years behind the camera, when I heard of a handsome duck nearby. Mark and I scrambled to see him. It was a dream all day, but his vibrance and character really cheered up the gloomy pond, and us. Another rare beauty I have been fortunate to photograph locally is the crossbill, while out on the lookout for green woodpecker. That often happens in wildlife photography. You go out with the expectation of observing a certain bird or animal. You rarely see it, but you will always see something of note. I did see the green woodie eventually as we were packing up to head home. Another example of me not finding the subject I am looking for, this spring I went looking out for whitethroat and came home with blackcap. Mark and I are often in Angus, excuse me, so seabirds on the cliffs have become a summer staple. If you want to become a successful wildlife photographer, there are certain methods that one can use to advantage. Get to know your desired subject. If you are specifically on the lookout for a particular animal, do your research. Read books and scour the internet to find out all you can. Habitat, food and breeding rituals are a good place to begin. Most of the time I know there is not time for research. Wildlife images are often caught unexpectedly on the hop, on a lucky day. Dress accordingly. I always try and blend in with my surroundings. I wear muted tones or camouflage, and I always wear a hat. This helps to mask my shape as I creep around the wilderness. I wear long trousers, boots and gaiters to prevent unwanted insect bites or stings. I try to walk slowly in zigzag patterns, thinking about how I can blend in with my environment. I don't wear perfume, and I try to stay downwind from my subject, especially if I see roe deer. They are very skittish and have extremely powerful noses, and they will spot me a mile away. Be prepared. Don't forget to check your memory card and battery are firmly inside the camera before setting off. I always carry waterproofs for me and my gear. I have a camel lens coat, and this helps to disguise my lens. And I often use a scrim net over my camera and tripod, which helps break up my lines and shape and hides movement from my hands as I adjust the settings. I also have a pop-up hide, which we use for scouting new locations. Birds especially are sensitive to any movement. Be patient, because wildlife is unpredictable. I often have to sit a while, but I immerse myself in nature and I enjoy every moment away from the usual hustle and bustle of life. If I am really quiet and still, the wildlife sometimes comes to me. Most animals like to emerge at dusk and dawn, making photography even more of a challenge. I would never use a flash, and I always try to keep disturbance to a minimum, and I don't share locations of protected species, which unfortunately is due to the large-scale persecution of many of Scotland's birds and animals, protected or not. Try not to compare yourself to others. Don't be disheartened if you see another photographer's images of subjects that you have captured. Every photographer has their own strengths and weaknesses, and comparing yourself to others is a slippery slope to unfulfillment. Every image tells a story, but it does not always show how hard won that image has been. Professional hides and guided trips are a great way of capturing wildlife, but I tend to do things the harder way. Responsible wild watching is a basic common sense, but common sense is not that common. I have witnessed some poor etiquette from other photographers in their quest to get the perfect shot, and it is not on. Walking over barriers intended to protect wildlife and allowing dogs off leads into ground nesting bird areas is highly irresponsible. Our basic responsibilities include sticking to the country code, leaving no trace, and simply respecting and protecting what you love. Always keep your distance, and if you are fortunate enough to stumble upon a nesting bird or resting animal, never interfere or disturb it. If you think an animal is injured, call the SSPCA for advice. On Christmas morning, Mark and I came across a stranded puffin while having a walk along our Grove beachfront. I thought it had perished, but as we approached, the little bird began to wriggle. We backed off immediately and called the SSPCA. It was amazing to see the little ox so close, but we knew it would not survive where it was. There were lots of herring gulls waiting to predate it. After receiving advice, Mark picked up the puffin and placed it gently in a holdall, and we took it home in the van. It was so light on my lap as I nervously gripped the handles, hoping the stress of the short journey would not be the end of it. Once we got home, we placed it in the quiet of the bathroom and waited on the SSPCA to collect it, which they did within an hour. I will never know the fate of our little puffin for Christmas, but I hope he just needed a good feed and warm-up and was released to go on and live his best life. I would never bait an animal or bird with food that they would not forage for naturally in our countryside. For example, I only supplement the squirrels with a handful of hazelnuts each time, and if it has been overly dry, as it has been this year, I will leave the odd apple, plum or pear in. I do not imitate bird calls or animal sounds or try to attract them in, as this can be detrimental to the wildlife, especially at breeding time or at times of migration. On many occasions, I do not achieve the image I want or even anticipate. Respecting Mother Nature is my first priority when it comes to wildlife photography. If I do not get the shot, then that's okay. Thank you all very much for listening, and if anyone has any questions, I will try my best to answer them. Thank you.